Hello, everybody. Welcome to the first inaugural IBDoc talk. For all you calprotectin fans out there, this is a first edition of our tips and tricks teleconference, and we appreciate all of those of you who decided to participate. My name is Colin Shaw. I'm the host of this event, and my colleague Stacy Smith is a big shout out to her for Stacy's efforts in setting all the logistics and the technical background of this up, and then communicating with you guys on the attendance requirements for this meeting. We were able to prime the pump for this meeting by receiving testimonials from the two participants listed down here, Dr. Samuel Fassi and Dr. Alana Carter. For those of you that can see the screen, this is meant to be a two-way or a multiple interaction teleconference, not just driven by me, but I wanted to start out with an introduction just to make sure we're all on the same page. This basically was requested in multiple different sites from Canada that we have interacted with over the last year as IBDoc has evolved its utility in Canada. The goal of this is for the IBDoc users, the clinical administrators, and the clinical users from the IBDoc portal to have a place to share their best practices and to share insights into how the IBDoc's working. As you can see on this slide, I've tagged all the different places across Canada from Nova Scotia to Vancouver Island. There's now 26 IBDoc portals live and active and running across Canada, so it's pretty exciting to watch. And the goal was throughout the last year and a half that we've been working with each one of you. Everybody has different epiphanies and everybody has different insights into how they're using the test and what best practices make things more efficient, or what they found over the duration of trying to use it that didn't work so well since they first tried. So the goal was to try to elicit the response from a couple people that have good experience and provide some not only of those benefits and tips and tricks, but also some of the toils and parts of using IBDoc that didn't work so well, and they've learned to evolve their testing. So with that in mind, I'll just walk through the outline of what I put together. So that was the welcome and the introduction, and then we have lined up a handful of testimonials. So 3 participants for the testimonials: Dr. Samuel Fassi from a private clinic and from St. Joseph Hospital. He uses IBDoc in both places in Western Toronto. And Dr. Fassi started using, if I remember correctly, so we started using IBDoc back in June. And the same thing for Alana Carter. Alana Carter is from the Taunton Surgical Clinic in Oshawa, Ontario. And she's an IBD nurse, and she is also a clinical user and a clinical administrator for the IBDoc portal. And then we have another very engaged person that's been using IBDoc since the very beginning in Canada. She's a clinical user and a patient for IBDoc. That's Dr. Vivian Wang. She is in clinic today, most likely won't be able to pop in, but she sent me text to read, which I think might find pretty enlightening. And then there's an opportunity significantly for an open mic, but this, like I said, this is an open dialogue for anybody that's a healthcare practitioner, whether or not you're a clinical user or a clinical administrator or interested in using IBDoc but not using it yet. Please feel free to ask questions. There is no, you should be able to all participate verbally without any problems. If there's a lot of dead time and there's and there's not a lot of questions or a lot of interactions, then I definitely have almost top 5 most recent and most popular frequently asked questions. And then I know it's probably not the most exciting thing, but there's a pending portal and software update at the end of the month that we've been planning for quite some time, that I can provide some insight into any of those people who want to hear those. So my name is Colin once again, and we'll jump right into to the next slide, which is for Dr. Samuel Fassi, once again from St. Joseph's Hospital in Toronto. Hello, Sam.
Great. Thanks, Colin. Thanks, Stacy, as well for organizing this, and thanks for having me and speak to everyone. So I thought I'd actually start off and introduce myself. I know Colin just introduced, but I think probably for a lot of the clinicians and nurse and physicians who are probably on the line, they'd be really interested sort of to get a better feel of what my practice would look like, and then you can have a better understanding of like how some of these pointers that I'm describing might actually fit in or not. So for those of you that aren't familiar much with the hospital system in Toronto, I'm at St. Joseph's Health Centre. So it's a community hospital, a community teaching hospital, and it's pretty busy. If for anyone who's ever been there, there's only 3 of us, 3 gastroenterologists, so we divide up the hospital. So it's a pretty busy place. So the way my practice works is I work partly in the hospital 3 days a week, and then and also from my private office outside of the hospital. And I have a secretary who works either from my office out of the hospital or either from home. And I do not have an IBD nurse. So I'm mostly doing all of these things myself. And I think this is sort of what sparked interest when I was giving some of my testimonials or describing to other colleagues sort of how I use IBDoc. I think they found it really interesting, because I think there might be a bit of a barrier where people feel they might not actually be able to do some of the things themselves. But as we'll discuss in our talk today, I think it's actually pretty straightforward. So IBDoc, just from the testimonials pointing out, I was early to start picking it up, and I think the program that was giving them out so we can actually trial it. And I've been finding it extremely helpful for my patients, especially my young patients, or the ones who have trouble actually coming back and forth to the labs, and we'll talk about that as well. And it's made a big difference, and actually I could see from a clinical aspect where it's made a difference, where patients have a bit of the ability now to test themselves, and we have rules set around when they're able to repeat their own test at home, and it might flag a result. I get a result, they get a result, and actually has led already in the short amount of time to a couple incidences where we actually were able to fine-tune some of the patient's care on the spot and not wait, for a few weeks of turnaround time. So let's try the next slide. I think I was going to chat about, right. So I think the big first step, of course, is going to be when you're trying to enroll the patients. Now, again, to put a little bit more context in my, so I'm really just doing this myself. My secretary, I'm not even sure she actually knows what IBDoc is or that I'm even doing this. So I've sort of kept her out of the loop. And so I do everything from the onboarding and giving out the kits and some of the an explanation while they're in clinic. So I think I've seen sort of the worst of how things can go, and the fact that I find it's not that difficult, I think, is a testament to the actual the kits. So the first thing is when I'm seeing the patient in the clinic, I actually get them to give me their email address on the spot, and I type it right into the EMR. Now, for anyone who has IBD nurses or even just an administrator who's very comfortable just setting this up, it's really easy just to input people into the portal. But again, I really think this takes 1 minute or 2 minutes max to actually do. If you save this as a tab on your Google or your Safari or whatever Internet Explorer that you're using, and you actually have the passwords already set, you can click in very quickly. And to actually add a patient is very simple. So it doesn't take very long to do that part. Now, another thing that came up, and I think I was speaking with Colin, and they're working on this on the back end, is making sure that the patient knows that some of these emails might actually go to spam. So I've had a few incidences where the patient really hasn't even signed up or registered yet, and it brought me to the point once where I actually just did it on the spot with the patient, and we looked at his phone together and went to his junk mail, and actually you could see the emails is sitting there immediately. So just a thing to mention when they're being onboarded, just double check your junk mail or your spam, as it might go there. Now, initially there wasn't the really nice pamphlets where I was directing them to the YouTube and there's a website, but actually now I think most clinics will have these pamphlets where they can actually have, they can even just check the QR code and it takes them right to the video. So there's YouTube videos, and I reiterate to the patient, make sure before you try doing this, you really understand all the steps and take a look at the kit, make sure everything works well. And I didn't come up with this point, but I think I remember this from another discussion we had with another colleague, is ask them to actually set it up the night before. So the film that goes over the toilet to catch the stool, have that set up even in advance. So then in the morning, they go and have a bowel movement, it's ready to go, and then they can do the testing. So so those are sort of like the initial things that I'm discussing with them, just sort of right when I'm getting them onboarded. Now, after that, another point is, if you don't see within a week, and it's pretty simple because the actual portal lists all of your patients, and you could see the ones very simply who have not done any tests, because it's all blank. There is no results. So the patient who hasn't even submitted their first test, and usually I have them perform a baseline when I'm giving them the kits. So if there's actually no reported result, I'll have my secretary just give them a shout and ask them, did you get everything okay? Do you understand how to do the kits? Are you planning on doing it? And usually that's a bit of a kick in the pants to get them to do their results. Now, in other programs, or we have in my hospital, sorry, I failed to point this out as well, which I think is an important point. So at my hospital, it's a bit unusual. And if anyone knows people that work in my hospital, do not let them know that this is unusual. But they actually pay for fecal cal in my hospital. So I don't find IBDoc an important issue because the program is covering it for free, or a part of the pilot, I'm able to give them the kits. But I find there's so many other benefits to it as a side to cost. But I think cost is also a significant issue for many other patients as well. Right. So if they did not actually do that first test, my secretary will call them, make sure that they have everything on board and ready to go, and that usually is enough incentive to get them to sign up. You're going to get the stragglers here and there that will lag even more than a week, but I think that quick follow-up will be really good. Sorry, and that's where I was straying on the aside. When I give people the requisitions just to do their kits in the hospital, those people take a lot longer than a week sometimes to get back, because they have to collect the stool at home, they have to come in during work hours, park at the hospital, actually come deliver it, and they try to time these things. So by the time you actually get those results, it's a lot longer than even that first week of getting someone to sign into a portal, and then add the 2-week turnaround time for some of the stool tests. So I think that's a little bit of a hiccup or a learning point that where the patient has to be actually being able to sign into and download this app. But I think with a little bit of vigilance at the beginning, it gets things moving and it becomes a non-issue.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense, Sam. Dr. Alfasi. Everybody, there is no one defined way to use IBDoc in a practice, and obviously what you defined there is unique. I think I only know of one other clinician across Canada that's doing all by themselves in terms of they don't have a nurse or colleagues that are also enrolled as clinical users. So the autonomy there is pretty significant. And I think you said that you basically have the tests at both your private clinic and at your hospital, and so when you can give them directly to the patient to each one of those facilities. Is that correct?
Right. So if they take it to my hospital, it's covered. So even if I see them in my office, the requisition I give them works at the hospital, so they can just pick up the kits and take it there. So yeah, so any of my patients can get it covered through the hospital.
And if you're giving them an IBDoc, are you walking through? So if you're teaching them how to use it, and the highlights that you listed in there in terms of reminding them to check their spam and to make sure they read and watch the video the night before and prepare for the next morning, do you show them the test kit, or do you just walk them through that pamphlet? How long does that take to do that training that you do?
I've sort of been doing my own randomized trial on myself with this. So for some of the patients, I open up the kit and show them every item through the kit, and then actually go through each of the steps. And then for some of my patients, I've just sort of showed them the actual closed kit and give them the pamphlet. So far, I haven't actually found anyone who's had trouble on either end.
Okay.
Telling me that, or calling when we actually follow up with them if we don't have any test result, saying that it was too difficult or they couldn't figure out, or we have no result because they actually couldn't do the stool test. So I'm actually not even sure if I'm sort of wasting some of my time by taking them step by step. I'm probably going to drop that portion, so it shortens that. But if I did go through all of the steps, it really only takes about 1 or 2 minutes where I'm showing them, you know, the stool catcher, the card, the dropper. So that portion only takes about 1 minute.
Nice. Interesting comments regarding the testing out, doing a little experiment and not seeing much of a result, difference in the results. And I'm looking forward to hearing during the open mic section what other people think. If you don't mind, we'll look at listen to our next unique experience and set up for tips and tricks and testimonial for using IBDoc. That's from Alana Carter, who's been, I think I said, has been using IBDoc enthusiastically. I met her back in June, and she had heard quite a bit about it, and so was very excited to be able to actually start running the portal in-house, and had a lot of very enthusiastic questions. So Alana Carter is a surgical nurse, IBD nurse, from Taunton Surgical Center in Oshawa. And without further ado, please let me introduce Alana and have her share her experiences with IBDoc.
Oh, great. Thanks. I'm super impressed with Sam. And thank you, Colin and Stacy. But I'm a little bit about myself. I'm the IBD nurse within a community practice, and I work with 3 gastroenterologists who I let them know that Sam's able to do this, but because I'm here, what I do is, again, you know, similar to Sam, I bring the patient in. I think it's important as well to review with them exactly why they're having this fecal cal testing and how their results are going to be interpreted, whether, you know, as it's part of their overall clinical assessment. That's very important. And once they're on board with that, we sit down, I actually have a sample kit that we go through, as well as I have a slide deck, a patient presentation. I do have the time, and I'm able to do that with each patient as well. I think the easiest thing is to enter their email address straight into the portal while they're in clinic and you're speaking with them. We as well download the app so we can they can at least be familiar with the app, going through it. They go home with a kit and a brochure that's easily laid out step by step. And within the kit as well, there's an easy step-by-step quick guide. The YouTube, sometimes we watch the YouTube if there's time in clinic. And so far, we've had, you know, patients. It's very, very convenient for patients. They don't have to go to the lab, pick up their stool sample containers, go home, do their stool sample, and bring it back to the lab. So it eliminates that step altogether. They're able to do it conveniently in their home at their own leisure and time. And as well, the results are immediate. And so far, I haven't had any technical issues with the IBDoc. usually there has been one or two that have been non-compliant, but usually I follow up with them within the week if their results are not on the portal. You can go on to the next slide, Colin. Again, Sam reviewed the majority of the tips and tricks, but just to go over, I think it's important just to remind them that the IBDoc needs to be refrigerated. So usually you go home, put it in the refrigerator just to keep it within temperature. And once they're ready, they can take the kit out, open it, lay everything out. And the best thing to say for the sample extraction to leave once they've extracted the sample and the kit is sitting there, to leave in the washroom, and you have a minimum of 2 hours up to 24 hours to test it. So if they go back to the washroom, it's a reminder to make sure that they are loading the test cassette.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Those seem to all be very pragmatic reminders that work for you pretty well. What were the responses from the 3 GIs that you work with when you came back and
well, I'm not in clinic every day. I do endoscopy as well and clinical research studies. So it's important that I even wrote up an information sheet that they can give the patient, the brochure, as well as it's kept in my refrigerator in my office, and they literally just have to, and I can even enter the patient in the portal, but they have yet to do that yet. They're like,
right.
We have you, you could do it. So,
right.
But it's very easy. Sam makes it sound so easy, and I think it is, and I think the patients find it very easy and convenient to use.
That's great to hear. Thank you. We just had a question pop up from Usha, and so we wanted to try to keep everybody on mute, and so we unmuted everybody in the beginning, but there was a lot of background noise, so Stacy pushed mute overall. So we'll go through and unmute everybody now, starting with Usha first, because hello, Usha. Are you there? I believe I see your hand raised, but you might have put yourself on mute. Vivian Wang was on logged in, but she just sent a text or a reminder that she had to leave, so she was not going to be able to follow up and read her testimony unless, are you online, Vivian? It looks like she logged out. So we have about 15 other clinicians on site, and so unless I hear from you, unless I have another hand up, if you can try to unmute attendees at all, that'd be great. I'll go on to the next step, which is to read the testimonial of certainly a unique perspective, and that's one of Dr. Vivian Wang, who's a physician, clinical user, and also a patient. So again, Vivian Wang just stepped out, but I'm going to read this testimonial from her, and the testimonial starts with some of her tips and tricks on her experience from the last year and a half of using this tool. How to get your patients to accept doing a stool test. Patients do not like collecting stool tests. Explain to them and show them how clean the IBDoc calyx valve and collection kit is. Patients do not like bringing the stool test to the lab, where the techs will pull it out in the bag in front of everybody. Explain to them that they don't have to bring the stool anywhere. It's a test that's done at home. Patients don't like having to receive a kit in the mail. Explain to them that sometimes you can pick it up from your clinic, and some other fashions, other programs to pick it up by the mail. Patients don't like having to arrange to have the stool sample picked up by a courier. Sometimes they have a hard time doing the timing with the Canadian Post or other situations where they feel it's embarrassing to bring their stool outside of their house. Explain to them that they don't have to go anywhere. They can collect everything at home and do the test at home, and voila. Patients don't like having to wait weeks for the lab results. Often they say they did the stool test. They may come for clinic already, but the doctor doesn't have the result because it takes weeks. Explain to them that with this test, they can have the result as soon as they run it. So that's the first barrier, which is how to get the patients to accept the fact that that stool tests are a benefit for them. How to get the healthcare providers to believe in the test. So these are all quotes directly from her, and people worry about accuracy. Tell them the ELISAs are no more accurate. For example, as explained above, old method was patients collect at home, wait for courier or mail to the Canada Post and bring to the lab. How much error is there in that? Tons, time delays, temperature changes, variability in lab dilutions, extractions, and processing. The IBDoc has a range of less than 30 to greater than 1,000 micrograms per gram. At least you can be reassured that below 500 is pretty accurate with ELISA testing. And when it's above 500, it still tells us active disease is present. Also tell them that with IBDoc, the liquid is exactly measured. There's no dilution involved and thus no lab error in the step. People worry about the ELISA taking forever. Tell them IBDoc, they get the results as soon as the patient analyzes the test. So general issues, people worry, can kids use the test? Can old people use the test? Yes, Sick Kids uses them on a regular basis, and I think we have a few people from Sick Kids here. I've had people as old as 60s using the test, and then speaking with Alana today, Alana just was enrolling somebody that was over 70 that had never downloaded an app on a smartphone, which is pretty courageous and shows the initiative that patient's taking in order to bring IBDoc in. Other issues, it's too hard and too complex. That the initial setup of the clinic might take a bit, but once you're set up, it's great to be able to log in, to see the patient's trends and such. Setting up patients in the clinic, it may take some time, so if you have a busy clinic, it may not work unless your nurse or assistant can help. Setting patients up live in the clinic is always better than sending them home with a kit, but sending home with a kit is at least better than sending them home to follow up with a mailed kit and a phone call. I generally send patients home with a letter explaining what FCP is and why FCP, et cetera. I think Dr. Afasi identified that there's a flyer out there that we've tried to put together that does a pretty good job of providing that training to patients where you don't have to walk them through that. And so for some patients, I send patients with the IBDoc FCP brochure that we optimize to explain the FCP is and why they use this test. So the common pitfalls. Here's the common pitfalls from a patient and a clinical user. Patients often forget they have to do the camera testing first with the paper. Patients often forget to flick before they open the valve. Patients often forget to put the cartridge on the blue paper or dark surface, and they will get an error otherwise. Patients can sometimes forget and leave it out too long and get an invalid. Patients complain about a paper collection that is too flimsy. A common tip is to use saran wrap inside a margarine or other container, and then the stool is collected inside the saran wrap. They can collect the sample and then discard the saran wrap in garbage. Patients complain of having diarrhea and cannot collect, but the device can still collect the liquid or semi-formed stool. They just need to avoid pure blood or mucus or fiber materials. And lastly, one strategy, it takes a lot of time. FCP is used when the patient is having a flare. Typically, we order C. diff, CNS, O&P, so I just throw in FCP as well. The issue is the other tests have to go back to the lab, but they can still collect stools at once and run the IBDoc FCP test immediately. Then if the infection work is negative, you can believe the FCP. But if the infection work comes back positive, you can treat and repeat FCP to see. Or you can rule out infection first, then run the FCP, but then the patient has to collect another sample. I've been using IBDoc FCP in the clinical research study where I offer longitudinal monitoring every 3 months for 6 months. And every month if FCP is elevated in the interim, along with monitoring of clinical scores, HBI and Mayo, and CRP and medication adherence responses and patient responses, all through my IBD dashboard. In a study I started in Edmonton in summer 2017 and finishing up now in fall of 2018. Patients in that study were actually very open to commending on their non-adherence, et cetera. And we flagged some patients based on FCP being very elevated. Some patients were so interested that they would contact us to follow up on their FCP. The doctors in the study like using the IBDoc for their patients who live remotely to labs, etc. I'm going to set up IBDoc into the preconception and pregnancy and IBD clinic in Mount Sinai Hospital so that I can monitor patients before and during pregnancy and postpartum with a method that will be easy for them, not to have to go to the lab, etc. And finally, the best way to convince your patients to use the test is to try to do one yourself. Then you'll learn those steps involved, how easy it is, and how encouraging or satisfying it is as a patient to get an immediate test result in your smartphone after running the test. I've used IBDoc myself or learned how to use it properly and provided the result to my doctor. Both of us wished we'd had access to IBDoc years before so we can monitor my IBD closer. So with that being said, should be an open mic. Does everybody have access to their audio? There is one question.
Usha has a question right here. Does not have, it's not on the phone. Has a question if you want to read that one.
Okay. This is from Usha. I only use the brochure for instructions and the patient have not had any problems doing the test using the brochure provided. I think that it took us a while to get that brochure together, but it makes a big difference for sure because it helps them answer a lot of questions prior to getting into that website and the video. I'm here on the phone, but I have few patients in the program. It's very easy, and it's hard to read the rest of it because it jumps out.
He says that I have a few points in the program. It is very easy to be an administrator and clinician.
So everybody should be off mute now. Is that true, or are they all on mute?
I'll double check that. Let's read this question right here from Michelle.
I'm in the U.S. This can not be marketed right now in the U.S. I appreciate that very much, and I look forward to responding to you and getting in touch with you. We're definitely in high hopes of being able to bring it to the U.S., but at this time it is not available. We had this test is live, and IBDoc is live in quite a few places in Europe and in Canada, and those places are very lucky to have access to it, but not yet in the United States. Dr. Jen Chow has a question. But I think some people have their own mutes on their own, so it's difficult to get people to ask the questions.
Oh yes, can you hear me?
Now I can. Yes. How are you doing, sir?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the nice presentation. I am Dr. Janshu from Montreal, Saint-Justine. I am a pediatric gastroenterologist. So I just have a question about young children. You said that there is not really difficulty for the result, but for the collection, there might be some issue on the collection part.
Yes, that was an email that I forwarded from the question I just shot back to you regarding the study that you're putting together. That was from a study from Europe that the product manager, Christian Reinhardt, put together, and that's one of the things that he indicated they should have done a better job of is making sure they had the training process for the parents and for the kids themselves to make sure they did the test correctly.
Okay.
I think it has a lot to do with the train the trainer program and make sure that the kids are using the test correctly. And two of the points that were brought up by Dr. Alfasi and Alana and also Vivian Wang were the patients forgot to flick, or there's a couple of points in the test where you've got to you definitely want to reinforce that. I think that's one of the main barriers that they want to make sure that they translate to the kids. I think that brochure that we have should help translate those questions.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. We are actually using it in children up to 4 years, but younger than 10 years, usually it's the parents that are involved.
From 4 years and above, is that what you're saying? What you said? Sorry.
Yes, 4 years and above. It's the age range we have actually the use for children under biologics.
Yes, and that makes sense. The 4 and above, that's actually the claim that we have out there, and that's from all the studies that we've done is from 4 years and above. We've seen quite a few papers that publish data that shows younger than that, calprotectin values are elevated randomly, but certainly much more elevated in healthy controls and very similar to normals when you're less than 2 years old. So it's pretty clear that greater than 4 is an important number to pay attention to for calprotectin measurements in general. So we're trying to unmute all the clinicians out there, and if anybody wants to ask questions, please either raise your hand or let us know.
Looks like Ashley might have a question.
Ashley,
Hi,
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing fabulous, thanks.
Thanks for having us today. I was going to answer the question about kids with following the directions to collect stool samples. So I'm one of the IBD nurses at Sick Kids. So all kids at our clinic. And what I was going to say in response to the question about with kids and following the directions is that they're really lucky. They have parents. And the parents are really keen to participate and to collect their child's stool samples. So we find that with the parents' reassurance, and also that the children and teenagers can also follow the YouTube video and use their app on their phone, and we don't seem to have any issues with our kids collecting the sample and getting results back.
Do you spend more time training the parents as compared to an older teenager, or where do you spend more time if you're working with a young child versus a teenager? Which one do you focus your training on more?
Teenagers, because teenagers are often reluctant for their parents to do the test for them. They want to do it themselves because maybe they're embarrassed by someone else seeing their stool. So with the young kids, it's mostly talking to their parents and training their parents. With the teenagers, I speak directly to them with their parents.
That makes a lot of sense. I have 2 teenagers, and they don't like listening to us anyway, so it makes sense that they wouldn't want to be relying on their parents to help them do this.
Yes.
Peter is online. He had a question. I'm trying to get Peter is very much involved at Mount Sinai, and he had a question, but I can't find it.
Peter, are you there?
Yes, sorry. There's something with my microphone here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Thank you so much for this actually amazing presentation. It's really good to see how other clinicians are doing this IBDoc project. So I'm one of the nurses working with Dr. Wong at Mount Sinai Hospital. And we also have a few other gastroenterologists that joined IBDoc too. My question is actually, how long does it usually take from the time that you enroll patients with IBDoc to have them do the IBDoc? So that's one of the things that I think I'm struggling a little bit with. So I do go through the instructions, the brochure that we have, and I send them the link and I enroll them right away. But it usually takes maybe 2 to 3 weeks to get them to actually use the IBDoc. So is there any extra tips or tricks to maybe make this process faster?
I'll recruit Dr. Alfassi or Alana or anybody else online that's open to providing suggestions there.
Sam, are you still there? Sam or Alana? Oh, might be having a little bit of technical difficulties.
So if I remember correctly, that one of the things that, if we're waiting for them to get back on, one of the things that Sam did was not only once you follow up with the patients, remind the patients. Hello?
Yep, sorry, I was muted there, so I couldn't unclick it. It's like being trapped in a box. It was hard to get out of it. Great. Yeah, I'm happy to field this question. So sorry, Peter. This is Samuel Fassi. I'm a gastroenterologist at St. Joe's. So there's a few things that I do to really get, and I had a whole bunch of other slides. Maybe like I think it'll come out in some of these questions. But some of the things that get the patients to be very intrigued in getting started and getting started right away. The first thing is, and I think Alana brought this up, is explaining obviously why fecal cal is important. The other thing is to have a game plan with them from a clinical standpoint. And I find this is where you get probably the most buy-in to starting this test. So if you're starting a new medication, or you're putting the patient on, they're having a mild flare and you're putting them on Cortiment, or if you're or if they're a new diagnosis, which is like the perfect time because a lot of these things are new. So this is now just the way it is, and they're learning that they have to do this kit. So having sort of a plan where they know that they're a part of sort of the treatment process. So, and this stool test is very important for them to actually get started. So I think that's one small thing. Not every patient is going to fall into that bucket, or you have a full game plan for them. But the other thing, like I was explaining, is if it's been about a week, and when you go to the portal, you're on the portal usually once a day or maybe every other day, and you're looking at your patient results, and you see there's a blank there, I just then send that to my secretary, a note, or their email address is right there in the portal. I don't know if you use secure email from your hospital, but then just a quick email to say, hi, I know that it's now been about a week. Just a little reminder, let us know if you're having any problems. It's really important we get your baseline test. And to be honest, I didn't really have many problems. There's really a couple patients, maybe just more non-adherence because of many other reasons. But I think if you have a game plan, they understand why it's important to use it. They know that they need another follow-up test in a few months, so we really need that baseline off the bat. And then for the handful of patients, that little quick reminder email about 1 week point, from my experience, that seems to get almost everybody going within a week.
Great, thank you so much. That's actually very helpful. I think that 1 week, we'll try that 1 week.
Great.
Does anybody else have any questions or any other commentaries that they'd like to participate in or bring up? Everybody should have should have access to their own mute button now that's available. So
maybe while we're waiting for a couple questions, I'll throw in a couple little extra points that I found that I have been using. Now, this is not the official response of Buhlmann, but from my experience, I actually don't ask the patients about what phone they use and if there's compatibility issues. I know we should, but I can tell you already, a couple of my patients have come back to me and said, oh, actually, I found out my phone is not compatible, so I had to use my girlfriend's phone. So that ended up being, if I asked them off the bat and gave them the list, they would have said, sorry, I don't have anything that's compatible with this, and they just wouldn't have done the test. But once they have the kits in their hand and they're keen on actually getting started, I think everyone can find a workaround. And I think someone else used their wife's phone. So I don't think being too worried, because I think a lot of the phones are covered here, that you have to spend too much time making sure there's a lot of compatibility issues. The other thing from my standpoint that I find, so like I was saying, I work at the hospital and in my office. Just be ready when you get the kits that you know where you're going to be putting them. So when they arrive, I need to make sure someone's there to pick them up and they don't just end up in some sort of storage unit in the endoscopy unit or at my office and no one's there to pick it up. So I make sure, depends I guess how you're receiving them, but even if you just are receiving the package, just make sure you have a fridge that has some room. The kits are relatively small, so you could probably store quite a few of them in a small little like a drink fridge.
that makes a lot of sense. Sorry, I tried to unmute somebody there from Dynacare. Isabel and Tina, I wanted to get you guys, if you have any questions or any comments, please let me know, or if you guys want to get have any suggestions, because you guys have a lot of experience in using IBDoc and supporting IBDoc. I was hoping to make sure that you guys had an opportunity to voice your opinion here, ask questions. So unless I hear from anybody, then I'm going to go back to the FAQs, which, and please feel free to pop in and ask questions. But so these are the top FAQs that basically I've gotten the last few months or weeks. I usually get a couple a day, sometimes as high as a couple of days, sometimes as high as a couple of weeks. But these are seem to be the top 5, if you will. So the first one is basically patient results not visible on the portal. And number 2 question is that usually starts up in the very beginning, and it's tough and frustrating if you don't look into it a little bit. But it says my phone says I don't have permission to use the camera. So when you sign a patient up, sometimes they have that setting that needs to be changed. And this is probably number 3 is probably the most frequently asked question, and that is either my clinical user or a patient lost a password, and patient can't find the email to set up the password. So the question there becomes, how do you reset a password? And that is an invaluable tool. Number 4 is when I go to register my patient, it says the email address has already been used, and this happens infrequently, but when it does, this is a good suggestion of what we need to do to move forward. And then don't know what happened to the typo there, but we have this came from one of the people online that we have 5 patients, but I can only see 2 patients. We have 5 patients in our portal. We can only see 2 patients when I log in as a clinical user, and why? So patient results not visible on the portal. I think hopefully this is an image that we use quite a bit in all the marketing material for IBDoc. But if you look on this is the Cal app on the smartphone of a patient who's been running the test, and you can see that there's 6 test results here, and ranging from normal to high to yellow and in between. On the far left-hand side, you'll see there's the cloud and the cloud with a checkbox. The cloud with a checkbox mean that result has been uploaded to the portal. The cloud with the arrow facing up means the patient had lost Wi-Fi when they were starting their testing, and the result has not been uploaded to the portal yet. So getting the patient to reestablish a Wi-Fi connection, and then once you install the app, you pull down on that finger, and just like any other app, when you pull it down, it refreshes the app, and it will resend the data that's out there. And sometimes it'll say if you don't have connectivity, it will give you the warning that you don't have connectivity. And obviously, if you look at the button, there's the button down at the bottom where on your smartphone. This is a picture of an iPhone, obviously, but to make sure you have Wi-Fi connection. Again, you can start running the test in the beginning without with Wi-Fi. You can run it. If you lose Wi-Fi halfway through, it'll still keep going, but it will not go to the portal until you get Wi-Fi again. So that's a pretty common response. There was a much more eccentric or unique response where somebody had resulted the archive, and they didn't know that they resulted an archive. So this is from one of the demo accounts, and this is a patient's result. And if you look at the red, that's an archive. There's an archive button, so you can archive that result, and it doesn't show up in the patient's results anymore until you go down and click unarchive. My phone says I don't have permission to use the camera. So again, that's a setting issue, and this shows in this iPhone where you have to go to the settings button, and then once you're in the settings button, find the Cal app, and then once you find the Cal app, then hit the camera, and then the camera will it will allow you actually change that little button to accept, so the camera has the access to use the app has access to the camera. And the same thing if you want to shut off your notifications, or if you want to turn on your notifications, right down below that is the notifications tab. So this is probably the #1 most frequently asked question regarding IBDoc Cal App portal, and it's basically losing a password or a patient never found a password. So the patient definitely, when you log in to create the patient in the Create the Patient app, and you put the email in there and click Save and Exit, they'll receive an email to invite them to set the password. And that password, if you can't find it, it's in the junk folder. But if you need to go back and reset the password, you basically just go to the regular page you go to, the IBDoc portal page. You enter the email address as you would normally, and then you click the button down below that says, instead of sign in, you click the button that says forgot your password. And once you click the forgot your password, then it'll bring up a new page, and that new page will be the password reset button. So you can do this from anywhere at any time. So if I wanted to do this for my email, like I did in this situation, I entered my email address, reset my password. It says the password was reset, and it sends an email. So I check my inbox, and then about 30 seconds later, I had this email in my inbox, and that's from support at IBDoc saying, here's the link to reset your password. So if I do that, I'm not obligated to reset my password. My password, I could still use it if I don't reset it. And if I do want to reset my password, I don't have to change the password. It could be the same password as it was before. So it's a very functional tool to make sure you know how to use efficiently. And then again, remind everybody that if you do find that email in your junk, to make sure you right-click on it and click Never Block Sender. Sometimes, I don't know if you guys have ran into this yet, but sometimes the patient's already been enrolled in the portal somewhere else throughout the world. So each email address has to be unique in the IBDoc portal. So if somebody in Germany is using that email address, or Ireland, or somewhere else across Canada, it can't be reused again. So if you guys try to go enter a new patient in and you use my email address, in this case, it will say this email address has already been used, and it won't allow you to use that email address to create the patient. So if you know for sure that that email is from a patient that you want to create in your portal, and that patient has been used in the past somewhere else, we have to migrate that patient. So as a few of you learned recently, then that requires a migration form now, and because we have to document this. And so basically, you let us know if there's a patient and that you need to migrate from an old account, and send it, and we'll send a form to the site where they're going to be migrating from, and we'll send a form to your site where they're going to migrate the patient to. That way we can document that, and we'll prove that everybody's okay with moving that patient or that email address. Same thing if you're a clinical user and you want to move from one clinic to another, we need to migrate your email address. And this is the last FAQ, which came from somebody on board here as well, or it was earlier on. That way, basically, when I log in as a clinical user, I see a different amount of patients as compared to a clinical administrator. I think that comes with. I think if that was the right awareness of the question, basically, this is a listing I have signed in this situation in this portal. This is a demo portal, and I've signed in as the clinical user. And the clinical user, you can see on the left-hand side, only sees the ability to view the dashboard and manage the patient. You can see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 patients affiliated with that clinical user. So these are the only patients that whereas Colin Shosky-CU is signed in as the treating physician. Whereas when I sign into that exact same portal as the clinical administrator, I see all 250 some odd patients in there. You see them at a higher level, but you still see them. Do you have is there a question that popped up?
Yes. Look,
What is the long-term durability of an unused kit? The app also does a good job of explaining what to do for our kids, Ashley says. So the kit has an expiration date on it, and I believe it is 12 months to 16 months from the date of manufacture is what the expiration date is. And the expiration date has certainly gotten longer for the kits to provide over the last year as the volume of the testing has increased. I think that's pretty true. Is there any other questions down below?
You answered all of them.
Okay. So if anybody has any, we have 5 minutes left. If anybody has any open mic or questions they'd like to ask, please feel free to reach up now, or I can jump the slide to the next, and we'll talk about the software update, which I'm not sure if how excited you are for that, but it's a big deal for us. So when we first started, here's a smartphone update that obviously is much larger than what we had when we first started last year. But the software update basically will come at the end of next week. So basically we'll allow a difference in the moderate and the high threshold. So that was, I know, frustrating because there had to have a delta between the moderate and high threshold of 200, which made it tough to have a 100 and a 300 when everybody wanted to have an upper high threshold of 250 based on the Canadian guidance paper and or the COM study. So we changed and reduced the delta between the moderate and the high, so you could have a minimum of 250. In doing so, we also set thresholds, so the minimum has to be somewhere between 80 and 250. So again, for for you guys, just a reminder, a mild is going to come out in a result in green, a moderate is going to come out in a result of yellow, and a high is going to come out in the result of red. That's what the stoplight indicator will be. And so we set the thresholds there for green can only be between 80 and 250. That's based on quite a few different papers out there that shows that that's a pretty standard range for knowing that somebody's no inflammation or not. Whereas the moderate and the high threshold has a max of between 200 and 500. So you can't have anything over 500 and not have it be a high red result, which makes a lot of sense. We also have a new result category. So now when the clinical administrator gets an email affiliated for the patient that they're affiliated with, that a test has been completed by the patient, the results category will be included in the subject line. So no longer will it just say patient ID 6355 completed a test. It will also identify whether that test was normal, moderate, or high, which hopefully is helpful to you guys. The treating, one of that's been brought up by a few people that were on the phone earlier, was in the IBDoc portal, the search mechanism and the scroll down mechanisms were difficult at times in order to scroll down, and or they were case sensitive. So they removed the case sensitivity in the search fields, and they made the scroll down list a little easier. Error description. So there was an error description where there's no error, which was very confusing to people. So that was removed. And these bugs, and there are about 20 other bugs that I'm sorry it took so long for some of these things. Our team has worked diligently, and on top of working and trying to balance between the amount of bugs that they're trying to fix or aspects of the portal that they're trying to evolve, they also have a lot of work to have to clinically go back and validate that. So it takes some time. So I think we're trying to do about every 6 months iterations between those bug fixes. So everybody should get an email on that at the end of the month. That's a clinical administrator with the account indicating that. And I think if you're a clinical administrator, you probably got an email saying that the portal will be down for about an hour this Saturday, early morning East Coast Standard Time. That's for one of the updates we need to do here. So without any, so this is their contact information. Feel free to obviously use that resource at the IBDoc.net website as much as possible. We try to keep up any new posters or any new publications or any new videos that we have on using IBDoc and put it on the IBDoc.net. So that should be a resource tool for not only you but also for your patients. Please feel free to reach out to us at info@Buhlmann Labs or myself anytime. We'll stay here and try to field any questions. But for those of you that participated, thank you very much. I appreciate the efforts and the energy that Sam Alfassi and Alana Carter and Dr. Vivian Wong put in to provide their testimonials and to support this first IBDoc talk. We look forward to evolving it and hope it's functional. We'd like to have a next iteration. If you guys have any feedback for how to do so efficiently, please let us know. I want to thank Peter and Ashley for their input as well. Obviously, they have some good insights, and I definitely want to thank Dr. Janchu for his question that's very relevant at the time. And luckily, we had some people that have very relevant, good experience to answer that question. So, thank you very much, everybody, for attending, and we appreciate that. If you guys want, if you have any colleagues who would like to receive a recording of this, please let us know, and I can send it to you. You got to reach out to Stacy or myself and let us know. But everybody have a great afternoon, and thank you very much to Stacy for coordinating this all.
Thank you. Thanks, Colin and Stacy.
Thanks, Alana.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sam. Thank you.
Have a great afternoon, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye.